Zane Dalton yanked off his tie and ducked into the alley behind the yacht club, his breath fogging in the cold spring air as flashes from camera bulbs chased him like wolves. "Just a few questions, Mr. Dalton," someone shouted behind him. He didn't stop running. His leather shoes splashed through a shallow puddle, and the moment he rounded the corner onto a quieter street, he yanked off his navy blazer, tossed it into a trash bin, and turned down his collar. The sleek billionaire CEO of Dalton Innovations now looked like a slightly disheveled man in a wrinkled shirt trying to escape a bad date. He wasn't supposed to be here. Not without security. Not without a driver. Definitely not without a plan. But after that disastrous press conference where the media hounded him about his father's legacy, his love life, and the supposed hostile takeover rumors, Zane had snapped. He hated being cornered like an animal. He hated being told how to answer, how to smile. Today he needed to breathe. And just when he thought he'd have to circle back and face the circus again, he saw it. Wedged between an old tailor shop and a boarded-up bookstore was a small cafe. No sign. No lights in the windows. Just a hand-painted chalkboard that read, "Open if you need to disappear." Zane blinked. Disappearing was exactly what he needed. He pushed the door open, and a soft bell rang. The scent of cinnamon and freshly ground coffee hit him instantly, grounding him in a way that no therapist ever had. It was warm inside, cozy, even magical in that quietly forgotten kind of way. And then he saw her. She was behind the counter, her hair a mess of auburn curls twisted into a loose bun, her sleeves rolled up, cheeks dusted with flour. She looked up from the dough she was kneading and gave him a slow, curious glance. "You look like you either robbed a wedding or ran from one," she said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Zane exhaled a breath that sounded dangerously close to a laugh. "Something like that. You want coffee, tea, or just a place to hide?" He stepped closer, glancing around the empty space. There were only 5 tables, a small bookshelf filled with used novels, and fairy lights strung across the ceiling. "Hide. Definitely hide." She nodded like that was the most normal answer in the world. "You can sit at the back. No one ever looks past the shelf." He followed her gesture and slid into the booth she pointed at. The seat was worn but soft, the kind of comfort that came from years of use. He leaned back, heart still pounding from the adrenaline. A few minutes later, she brought over a steaming mug of something rich and dark. "I added cinnamon." "You looked like you needed something warm." He stared at her, surprised. "You didn't ask what I wanted. You didn't look like the kind of guy who knows." He gave a quiet chuckle and took a sip. It was perfect. She started to walk away, but he couldn't help himself. "Wait, what's your name?" She turned, lifting a brow. "Olive Grayson." "Zane," he said, and immediately regretted it. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Zane Dalton." He froze. She laughed. "Relax. I'm not gonna tweet your location. I don't even have Twitter." "You really don't recognize me?" he asked, half hopeful, half disbelieving. Olive shrugged. "I recognize the expression on your face more than your name. I've seen it on people trying to outrun grief or guilt or pressure." Her voice softened. "You looked like you were about to implode." He looked down at the cup. "I was." "Well, you're safe here. I don't do headlines, and I don't care how many zeros are in your bank account." He looked up, stunned for a moment. No one ever said that to him. "You run this place alone?" "Mostly. My aunt used to own it, but she moved to Florida. I kept it going." She leaned her hip against the booth. "It's not glamorous, but it's mine." Zane looked around. "It's peaceful." "That's the point," she said with a small smile. "You'd be surprised how many people come in here just to breathe." He studied her then. She didn't fawn over him, didn't ask for a selfie, didn't push for a conversation. She wasn't wearing makeup, wasn't trying to impress anyone. There was something so painfully real about her, it was like a slap to the face. He came back the next day. And the day after that. At first, he didn't talk much. He'd sit in the booth, drink whatever she handed him, and listen to the low hum of the cafe's old radio. But Olive? She talked. Not about him, never about him. She talked about the books on the shelves, about the old lady who came in every Thursday for a lavender scone, about how the espresso machine had a weird hissing sound like it was judging her. Zane found himself laughing more in that cafe than he had in years. By the end of the first week, he knew that her favorite cake to bake was lemon poppy seed. That she hated mornings but loved watching the city wake up from her window. That she had a little scar near her jaw from falling off her bike when she was 8. That she never wore watches because she hated being reminded of time. And Olive? She learned that Zane Dalton wasn't the cold, robotic CEO the magazines made him out to be. He was sharp, yes, but he was also funny in this dry, sarcastic way. He loved puzzles, hated champagne, and had never learned to ride a bike. "You're kidding," she laughed one afternoon. "I was busy. My father thought bikes were for kids without ambition." "So what did he give you instead?" Zane looked away. "A stock portfolio." Olive blinked. "That's the saddest sentence I've ever heard." He laughed, and it felt good. Too good. He didn't mean to be drawn to her. But he was. And he didn't mean to miss her when he left at night. But he did. One evening, after the cafe had closed and he offered to help her sweep, Olive leaned against the counter and looked at him differently. "You know, you've come here every day for almost 2 weeks," she said softly. "It's the cinnamon," he said. "Addictive. You're not running anymore, are you?" He looked up at her. "No. I'm just here." She nodded slowly, her voice quieter now. "So what happens when you go back to your real life?" He didn't answer right away, but something in his chest twisted. "I don't know. I don't want to think about it." She took a step closer. "You can't stay hidden forever." "I know." He met her eyes. "But I'm not ready to leave either." And for the first time since he'd stepped into her world, Olive's expression changed. It softened into something tender. "Vulnerable?" "Then don't," she whispered. Zane exhaled slowly. "What if I said I didn't want to?" Her eyes searched his face. "Then I'd tell you that scares me." "Why?" "Because people like you don't stay." And for once, Zane didn't have a clever reply. But he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't ready to leave. And maybe, just maybe, he didn't have to. The first time Olive invited him into the kitchen, it was because her mixer broke. Zane had just stepped through the door, brushing off the rain from his shoulders, when she looked up from the counter with her hands on her hips and a half-dead electric mixer in front of her. "You're good with machines, right?" she said without preamble. Zane raised an eyebrow. "I build energy tracking software for aerospace tech. I don't fix kitchen appliances." She pointed to the mixer. "Well, unless you want to stir 5 pounds of batter by hand, you're about to learn." He didn't argue. Not because he was particularly eager, but because there was something strangely satisfying about being needed for something that didn't involve a boardroom or a billion-dollar decision. He rolled up his sleeves and followed her into the back. The kitchen was narrow but well-loved, the walls lined with hanging copper pans and tiny potted herbs. There was flour on the floor, a dish rag draped over the oven handle, and a warm, yeasty scent lingering in the air. "You know this is a health violation waiting to happen," he said as he crouched beside the mixer. "Then don't report me," she replied, tossing him a screwdriver she kept in a drawer next to the measuring spoons. Zane took the mixer apart while Olive measured out ingredients and began humming under her breath. It wasn't a tune he recognized, probably something she made up on the spot, but it was soft, almost hypnotic. "You always sing when you bake?" he asked, testing the motor with careful fingers. "Only when I don't want to think," she said, cracking an egg with one hand. "Music keeps the doubts quiet." Zane glanced up. "What kind of doubts?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she added sugar to the bowl and stirred it slowly. "That maybe running this place was a mistake," she said finally. "That maybe what I thought was freedom was just hiding with a prettier name." He paused. "You think hiding and freedom feel the same?" She looked at him, eyes steady. "Sometimes. Until someone walks in and reminds you what you're missing." Zane didn't know what to say to that. He tightened the last screw and stood up. "Try it now," he said. Olive flicked the switch. The mixer roared to life, spinning the whisk attachment like it had never failed her. She beamed. "Well, look at that. The billionaire tech mogul saves the day with a screwdriver." He leaned against the counter, wiping his hands. Don't make a habit of that nickname. So you admit it now? She teased. I never denied it. You avoided it. I preferred not being dissected like a lab rat. Fair. She poured the batter into a tin and slid it into the oven. You ever cook anything yourself? Besides corporate deals. Zane crossed his arms. I once made toast and nearly set off the fire alarm. Olive laughed. A real one that echoed off the tile. We might have to fix that. The timer beeped, and she turned to the sink. He watched her in silence, the way her fingers moved quickly, efficiently, the way she hummed again when she thought he wasn't listening. You're not what I expected, he said. She glanced over her shoulder. Expected what? I don't know. Someone more impressed. Or at least more interested in who I was out there. She turned off the faucet. Why would I be impressed by someone who doesn't even like who they are out there? Zane didn't answer. The silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable but thick with something unspoken. He looked around the kitchen. It was small, imperfect, alive. Nothing like the sleek, sterile penthouse he slept in alone every night. You ever think about leaving this place? He asked. Sometimes, she admitted, drying her hands. But then I remind myself why I stayed. What's the reason? My mother used to bring me here when I was a kid. It was the only place she ever looked happy. She'd sit at that window table, drink her coffee black, and tell me stories about the world she never got to see. Zane stepped closer. She's not around anymore? Olive shook her head. Cancer. 4 years ago. He hesitated. I'm sorry. She offered a small nod. Thank you. He looked at her then. Really looked. She was the kind of woman who carried her pain quietly, with dignity, like she'd folded it into her bones a long time ago. There was strength in her softness, and it disarmed him in ways he didn't understand. I think I like it better here, he said, almost to himself. Olive leaned back against the counter. Better than what? Everywhere else. He didn't expect her to respond, but she surprised him again. There's a fundraiser tomorrow night, she said. Local shelters, small business grants. I usually donate baked goods. You want to come with me? He blinked. You mean like together? I mean, if you're going to keep hiding here, you might as well see what this neighborhood is really about. He wasn't used to being invited without an agenda. What's the dress code? She grinned. Whatever doesn't get powdered sugar on it. He chuckled. That narrows it down. The next day he showed up outside the cafe just before 7. He wore jeans. No tie, no driver, no cameras. Olive handed him a box of lemon bars tied with twine and led the way down the street. The event was held in a community center lit with mismatched string lights and filled with the sound of laughter and someone's uncle playing the saxophone in the corner. Zane was anonymous here. No one asked him about quarterly earnings. No one followed him with flashing bulbs. He carried boxes. He held the door open for elderly volunteers. He even bought a raffle ticket for a hand-knit scarf he'd never wear. At some point, Olive tugged him out onto the dance floor. I don't dance, he said quickly. You don't bake either, she replied, taking his hand. The music was fast, the rhythm uneven, but she didn't care. And somehow neither did he. They stumbled through the steps, laughing, spinning, crashing into each other, until the song ended and they were breathless and flushed. Later, as people began to leave and the tables were cleared, Olive sat beside him on the curb outside. You looked happy in there, she said. I was. She turned to him. So what happens now? Zane looked down at his hands. I don't know. I've spent years planning everything. And this wasn't in the plan. She tilted her head. Maybe that's the point. He stared at her, the woman who had somehow unraveled him without ever trying to. There was no script for what he felt, no exit strategy, and for the first time he didn't want one. Zane had never seen Olive outside of the cafe until the fundraiser. But now, with the echo of laughter still hanging in his mind and the scent of her shampoo lingering from when she'd leaned into him on the curb, something shifted. He didn't return to the cafe the next morning. Instead, he stood at the window of his penthouse, high above the city, looking down on a world he once ruled with precision. The silence in his home was a different kind of loud. No clinking mugs, no humming, just the hum of central air and the distant drone of traffic. He was 20 minutes late when he finally stepped inside the cafe. Olive didn't look up right away. She was wiping down the counter, her braid hanging over one shoulder, wearing a faded sweatshirt with paint splatters on the sleeve. "You're late," she said without turning. "You don't open until 11 on Sundays." "I opened early today." He approached the counter. "Why?" "Thought maybe you'd come by." He leaned on the edge. "You were right." She looked up, finally, and her eyes searched his face like she could spot the reason behind his hesitation. "I thought about not coming," he said. "Thought it might be easier." "Is it?" "No," she slid a clean mug across the counter. "You want the usual?" "I don't think there's anything usual about this anymore." She folded her arms and leaned on her elbows. "So what's happening, Zane?" "I have a board meeting tomorrow. They're expecting me to announce a strategic acquisition. My name is on every major headline this morning, and they're all asking where I've been. And you still came here. I didn't want to be anywhere else." She glanced at the door. "What happens when they come looking?" "They already are." "Then what are you doing?" He hesitated, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. "I bought the building." Olive blinked. "What?" "This one. And the two on either side." She stepped back. "You." "What?" "I didn't want anyone else to get their hands on it. Developers have been circling this block for months. I overheard a conversation at the fundraiser. They were planning to make an offer." Her voice was quiet now. "You didn't think I could handle that myself?" "I didn't want you to have to." Olive went still. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want it to feel like a transaction. I wanted to protect this place. Because it matters." "You think I'd sell it to a developer?" she asked. "No. But I know what they're capable of. I've been one of them." She crossed her arms. "You should have told me." "You're right. I should have." She stared at the envelope, then at him. "So what now? You own the block, and I'm what? A tenant?" "No. You're the owner. I put it in your name." Her breath caught. "You did what?" "I bought it. But I signed it over. The cafe and the space above it. It's yours. No strings. No contracts. You don't even know if I want that." Zane looked down at the counter. "It's not about what I want. It's about what you deserve." She didn't speak for a long moment. Then, softly, "Why are you doing this?" He lifted his gaze. "Because you're the first person who's ever made me feel like I wasn't a product. You never asked for anything. You never tried to use me. You looked at me like I was just a man trying to breathe." She swallowed hard. "And this is your thank you?" "No. This is me trying to be the man you thought I already was." Olive reached for the envelope, fingers trembling slightly. She didn't open it. Instead, she set it aside and turned her full attention to him. "You scare me, Zane. I scare myself." She stepped around the counter, standing just inches away from him now. "You come into my life like a storm and expect me to just take it." "No," he said. "I expect you to tell me when I'm pushing too hard. I expect you to be honest with me even when it hurts. Because I don't want to lose this." "What is this?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. He reached for her hand. "It's the first real thing I've felt in years." She didn't pull away. "You could have walked away," she said. "You could have vanished after that first day." "I tried to. I couldn't." "Why?" "Because I've spent my life building walls so high, I forgot what it felt like to be seen. And then you looked at me like I wasn't broken." She stared at him for a long moment, eyes shining with something he couldn't name. Then she took a step back, her fingers slipping from his. "I need to think," she said. "Okay. Not because I don't care. But because I do. He nodded. I'll wait. She gave a small nod, then turned and walked into the back. Zane stood there a moment longer, staring at the envelope she'd left on the counter. He didn't know what would happen next, but for the first time he wasn't afraid to wait. Zane stood in the middle of his private office, the skyline stretching endlessly behind him, but it felt like standing in a glass cage. The board meeting had ended hours ago. His team had celebrated the finalized acquisition, and his name was once again splashed across every financial news channel, but none of it meant anything. Not without her. He hadn't heard from Olive in 3 days. She hadn't called. She hadn't opened the cafe. The lights had been off each morning he passed by, the chalkboard out front wiped clean. He'd respected her space, but today he couldn't keep pretending he wasn't unraveling. He locked his phone, grabbed his coat, and walked out, ignoring the assistant who tried to stop him mid-sentence with updates on press inquiries. Zane stepped into the elevator, pressed the button for the ground floor, and didn't look back. The moment he reached her street, he knew something was wrong. The windows were dark again, but this time the front door was unlocked. Zane stepped inside. The cafe was quiet, but not empty. A young woman barely out of her teens stood behind the counter, wiping down trays with trembling hands. "Where's Olive?" Zane asked, stepping forward. The girl looked up, startled. "She's at the hospital. Her aunt collapsed this morning. I am just helping until she gets back." He didn't wait for more. He turned on his heel and was gone before she could finish the sentence. By the time he reached the hospital lobby, breathing hard and coat flapping behind him, he didn't care about the questioning looks or the fact that he hadn't been in a hospital since his father's funeral. He asked for Olive Grayson and was directed to the 3rd floor. He found her sitting alone in a hallway chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, staring at the floor like it might fall away at any moment. "Olive?" She looked up, her eyes wide. "What are you doing here? I needed to see you." She stood but didn't move closer. "You shouldn't be here. You didn't answer my calls. I went to the cafe. Someone told me about your aunt." "She's stable," Olive said quickly, her voice tight. "They're keeping her overnight for observation. She fainted, that's all. The doctors think it was exhaustion." He took a cautious step forward. "Why didn't you call me?" She folded her arms across her chest, her shoulders stiff. "Because I didn't know if I could handle seeing you." Zane nodded slowly. "Is it because of the building?" "No," she said. "It's because of everything else." He waited. "I've spent so long building something small that I could manage. Something I could protect. Then you walked in and cracked it open in a week. And now I can't stop thinking about what it would mean if I let you stay. I never asked you to change your life for me." "No," she said. "But I'd have to. And you'd have to change yours too. And I don't know if either of us knows how to do that without breaking something." Zane ran a hand through his hair. "I don't have all the answers, Olive. I've spent years making sure I was 10 steps ahead of everyone. But with you, I can't even see the next step. And maybe for once, that's okay." She looked away. "I didn't buy that building to trap you," he said, voice low. "I did it because I didn't want you to lose something that mattered. But if it made you feel like I was trying to own a piece of your life, I'll walk away from all of it. I'll sign it back to whoever you want. You don't even have to see me again. Just say the word." She was silent for a long moment. "You're not the man I thought you were," she said finally. Zane's chest tightened. "You're better." He blinked, stunned. Olive stepped forward, her eyes shining. "I didn't fall for the man in the headlines. I fell for the one who helped me fix a mixer without asking questions. The one who danced with me in sneakers and bought a raffle ticket for a scarf he'd never use. The one who made me feel like maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to do everything alone." He let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "Then let me stay. Not in the cafe. Not as some billionaire who landed in your life by accident. Just as me." She reached for his hand. "Then don't leave." Zane pulled her into his arms, and this time, she didn't hold back. Her head rested against his chest, his arms wrapping around her tightly, grounding them both. Later that week, the cafe opened again, but not as it was. The small sign out front had a new line written in chalk under Olive's usual quote. In simple script, new partner. Same cinnamon. Inside, Zane sat at a corner table, sleeves rolled up, flour on his forearm, and a tray of half-burnt cookies in front of him. I followed the recipe exactly, he said, frowning. Olive leaned over his shoulder, trying not to laugh. You forgot the baking soda. He sighed. That's a real thing? She kissed the side of his jaw. You're learning. He looked around. The cafe was fuller now, neighbors, regulars, and a few curious newcomers who'd heard rumors that a certain billionaire was making lattes behind the counter on weekends. He didn't care. He was exactly where he wanted to be. That night, after closing, Zane took her by the hand and led her up the stairs to the apartment above the cafe, the same one Olive had never had the time or money to fix up. Except now the lights worked. The walls were painted soft cream, the furniture simple and warm. A record player sat in the corner, spinning a mellow jazz tune. And in the center of the room was a small table set for two with candles, cloth napkins, and a meal he'd ordered from the Italian place she once mentioned liking. Olive stared at the room, stunned. How? I had the keys, he said simply, and a few favors to call in. She turned toward him, her eyes soft. You didn't need to do all this. I know, but I wanted to. She stepped closer. You're not running anymore, are you? He shook his head. I'm exactly where I want to be. Outside the window, the city lights flickered. But inside, the world had narrowed to just them. Zane reached into his pocket and held out a small velvet box. Olive's breath caught. He opened it slowly. Inside was a ring, delicate, understated, but set with a single stone that shimmered under the warm light. I don't want a headline, he said. I don't want a spectacle. I just want you. She stared at him, silent. Marry me, Olive. Stay in this messy, unpredictable, real life we somehow built together. Her eyes filled. Yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger as she laughed through her tears, then pulled her into a kiss that tasted like cinnamon and everything he'd never known he needed. And for the first time in a very long time, Zane Dalton wasn't the man everyone else wanted him to be. He was just a man. In love. Finally home. The first time Zane truly understood what it meant to build a life outside of the spotlight was on a quiet Tuesday morning, 2 months after Olive said yes. She was kneeling in the back garden behind the cafe, coaxing a stubborn rosemary plant into the soil with dirt under her fingernails and a sun too big for her head. Zane leaned against the doorframe, sleeves rolled up, holding 2 mugs of coffee she'd taught him how to make without burning. You're going to fight that plant all summer, he said, handing her a mug. She took it without looking up. It's not a fight. It's a negotiation. Zane crouched beside her. You always this stubborn with small things? Only the ones that matter. He watched her press the soil down gently, her movements slow and intentional. You never told me what you wanted to do with this space. I was thinking maybe a few tables, some string lights. A garden menu in the evenings. Something small. Not everything has to be small anymore. She finally looked up. But that's what I love about it. I don't need it to be more. He nodded. Then let's build it like that. They didn't rush the wedding. Olive didn't want grandeur. She wanted it honest. Real. Something that felt like them. They chose a courtyard tucked behind an old library with ivy climbing the walls and music played by a 3-piece jazz band that Zane had once seen performing in the subway. Olive wore a soft blue dress the same shade as the cafe walls and walked down the aisle barefoot, her hand in her aunt's for the final few steps. Zane stood waiting, not in a tuxedo but in a dark shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, the cuffs stitched with barely visible embroidery. OG. His vows weren't memorized. He spoke them like a promise, not a performance. I used to think love was something you bought, he said. That it existed in penthouses and power deals. You taught me it lives in burnt cookies, broken mixers, and people who stay when they don't have to. Olive reached for his hand. And you taught me that not everyone leaves. That sometimes the person who turns your life upside down is the one who finally helps you breathe. They didn't sign their marriage license with a flourish. They signed it sitting on the cafe floor after closing, with flour on Olive's cheek and Zane's tie draped over the espresso machine. A few weeks later, the upstairs apartment bloomed with life. Not expensive art or curated decor, just books stacked in corners, a record player that skipped on one song they both secretly liked, and mismatched mugs lining the open shelves. Zane never went back to the boardroom. He didn't need to. He sold his shares to his COO, stepped back from the company without fanfare, and ignored the headlines that called it his early retirement. He turned the corner office into a scholarship fund for underrepresented students in tech. When Olive found out, she didn't say anything, just kissed him with her hands on his face and her eyes full of something that felt like home. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the café's garden filled with neighbors and soft laughter, Olive rested her head on Zane's shoulder as they sat tucked in the back, watching it all unfold. "You ever miss it?" she asked. "What?" "The noise. The power. The empire." He shook his head. "I never had power. Just control." This, he gestured toward the garden, the clinking glasses, the smell of lavender and lemon from the new summer menu. "This is something I never knew I wanted." "You think it'll last? With you?" "Always." Later that night, after the last guest had left and the dishes were stacked, Olive pulled him onto the cafe floor, barefoot as always. "What are we doing?" he asked, laughing. "Dancing," she said, flicking the radio on. "But there's no music." She pressed her head to his chest. "Then listen harder." He held her close, swaying with her in the quiet, the hum of the city outside fading into something distant and unimportant. They didn't talk about forever. They lived it. And in that little cafe, with cinnamon in the air and laughter echoing in the walls, Zane Dalton, the man who once ruled skyscrapers, found everything he never knew he needed in the arms of a woman who never asked for anything but the truth. Years later, the cafe still stood. The chalkboard out front changed daily, but one line never did. "Open if you need to remember what love feels like." And behind the counter, always together, were two people who'd stopped running, not because they had nowhere else to go, but because they'd already arrived home.